Many ethnic conflicts occur all around the world, and the matter should be taken with seriousness. An ethnic conflict is a conflict between two or more contending ethnic groups. While the source of the conflict may be political, social, economic, or religious, the individuals in conflict must expressly fight for their ethnic group's position within society. One of the many conflicting ethnic groups are Chechnya and Russia. To provide background information, Russia is located in northern Asia and Eastern Europe. Chechnya is a Russian republic located in northern Caucasus, which is just east of the Caspian Sea. In the Middle Ages, the lowland of Chechnya was dominated by the Khazars and then the Alans. Some Chechens converted to Eastern Orthodox Christianity, but with a presence dating back to the 7th century, Islam gradually spread among the Chechens. Since then, Chechnya has always been predominantly Muslims. Today, they are also severely anti-gay. The foundations of this conflict started long ago. Historically, Chechnya served as a middle ground between the Persian, Ottoman, and Russian empires. However, beginning in the late 18th century, Russia began to establish its presence in and around the Chechen region. From 1817 to 1864, Russia invaded to control over and ethnically cleanse the northern Caucasus in what's known as the Caucasian War. It didn't have full control over Chechnya until 1877. When Russia turned Soviet in 1922, life in Russia changed forever.
Once Vladimir Lenin and later Stalin rose to power under the Soviet Union, the relationship between Russia and Chechnya began to change. During World War II, there were allegations of Chechnya collaborating with Nazi Germany, and whether it be true or not, Stalin forcibly removed all the citizens of Chechnya to Siberia and Central Asia in what's known as the Ardakh. The long, grueling marches caused thousands of Chechens and other people of North Caucasian descent to die of exhaustion, lack of food, and the freezing temperatures. It was a devastating form of ethnic cleansing, and as you can imagine, when the Chechens were returned to their homeland after the war, they were not very happy. Upon the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, Chechnya and other areas of the Northern Caucasus saw their opportunity to gain independence. Under the leadership of President Dzhokhar Dudayev, Chechnya declared its independence from Russia and shortly after adopted its own constitution. Despite being in political chaos, Russia would not give up so easily. This marks the start of the First Chechen War in 1994. After 2 long years of fighting and thousands of lives lost, neither side would give in. Although Chechen's president Dzhokhar Dudayev was killed, it was Chechnya's victory at Grozny that ultimately led to the Russia's ceasefire agreement that ended the war. Russia agreed to recognize Chechnya's government under its new president, Aslan Maskhadov, but the issue of independence still remained. Feelings of animosity between Chechens and Russians persisted. Countless kidnappings, murders, and bombings continued on. Eventually, tensions boiled over into armed conflict when Chechen warlords invaded the neighboring region Dagestan, which kicked off the Second Chechen War in 1999. Vladimir Putin responded by appointing Akhmat Kadyrov along with some troops to oversee and suppress the rebels. Evidently, this plan wasn't too successful, because in the following years, not only was Akhmat Kadyrov assassinated, but Chechnya continued to terrorize Russian schools, villages, and government buildings. In 2002, a group of radical Chechens seized Moscow's Dubrovka Theater, holding over 800 people hostage and killing up to 120 of them. The Russians retaliated with such force that in 2005, Chechen President Aslan Maskhadov called for a ceasefire agreement and asked for peace. However, Putin denied him. The Russians wanted revenge. Fighting continued to rage on. In 2006, one of Chechnya's head generals, Shamil Basiev, was killed. Finally, after 10 long years, Russia decided that it had had enough and declared the war to be over. Despite the war technically being over, tension, suicide bombings, and kidnappings still occur on both sides. Chechens and Russians alike hold a strong hatred for each other. In addition, Chechnya continues to abduct, torture, and kill its LGBT population, while Russia does very little to combat it. To this day, the conflict has had a detrimental impact on all countries involved, and an equitable solution has yet to be seen.
The impact of the Russian-Chechen conflict can still be felt today. In Russia, we see inconsistent leadership due to assassinations and the varying agendas of different presidents. In Chechnya, we can see a loss of original land and independence as a country. In both Siberia and Central Asia, which were places of exile for Chechens in 1944, we can see descendants. The Russian-Chechen conflict is complex and neither side is completely correct. However, when we look at the overall positions of both sides and different actions from each country, we can see that the Chechens do have a stronger claim. The Chechens have been oppressed and forcibly removed from their homeland for 50 plus years, which is why they should become an independent country. However, due to their history of terrorizing public places like schools and the capturing and torturing of the LGBTQIA+ community, while also denying their presence, independence should be a controlled event with pre-agreed conditions that would end the persecution of Chechen's own citizens. But the group also hopes that Russia will reevaluate some of their previous actions and policies and also work to improve themselves. Ultimately, the current conflict was started by the Russians and further perpetuated by their ethnic cleansing of the Chechen territory and refusal to keep peace and end the war in 2005, so they should allow the Chechens independence, but nothing more than their original territory. Violence has occurred on both sides, and neither was completely right, and both further perpetuated the already complex situation. But the actions of both sides are balanced, and we can see a slightly larger offense to the Chechens and more support for their independence. We can see that Chechens have a stronger claim to the land. However, now the question is, what is an equitable solution for the conflict? An equitable solution is for Russia to give Chechens a piece of land no larger than their original area and allow them to become a separate country or a completely autonomous province of Russia. Both sides' values are vastly different, and a permanent solution is unlikely unless a clear division and clean slate is created. The Russians fought for land and succeeded, and therefore shouldn't lose more than they had when the conflict started. But the Chechens deserve their own land for all of the hardships they have faced, and a piece of land would mean they no longer need to fight. The solution is obviously more complicated, but in its simplest form, the two countries would each have their own land and no longer need to interact, and the conflict between Russia and Chechen is long-lasting and ingrained in the current generations. Until a leader who is supported by an entire generation and unlikely to be killed by extremists is put in power and his successors who will stay on the same path, the conflict will not end, or at least it won't end permanently. Also, if Russia continues to hold Chechen under its control, then a larger, more effective action needs to be taken in order to prevent violence against Chechens, especially the LGBTQIA community, considering that with Russia's 2013 gay propaganda law, a rise in homophobia and hate crimes towards the LGBTQIA+ community was seen. Neither side is completely right or wrong, but both need to work together in order to create a permanent solution.